I heard the story from Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, L'Zayin Gesund. Said there was a man that had to marry off his daughter, and he was struggling. And the bottom line was he needed 500 ruble. It's nicht gegangen. So he wrote a letter to the Rabbi Shalom. Dear God, I need 500 ruble. And he put it into the mailbox wherever he was in Kiev, I don't know where. And the postmaster noticed the letter addressed to the Rabbi Shalom. He didn't know what to do. I guess he wasn't very good at making paper airplanes. So he figured, who do I give this to? So he opened it up and he read it. I guess that was the minig then in Kiev, that if you didn't know who to address it to, you opened it up, you read it. So he reads it, and he says, I think I should give this to Baron Rothschild. So he puts it into Rothschild's mail. And Rothschild is going through his mail, his bills from the telephone company and everything else that he has there. His yacht and his new hotel. And all of a sudden there's this letter addressed to the Rabbi Shalom. So he says, all right. He reads it. And he laughs, interesting, what people wouldn't try. So he says, I'll give the guy 400 ruble. So he sends him 400 ruble. Anyway, a few years later, the guy has to marry off another daughter. Does the same thing, something works once, you try it again. Dear God. And the postmaster again sees it. He really knows what to do. If you have a letter to God, give it to Rothschild. Rothschild reads it, he says, okay, 400 ruble. And a while later, he has to marry off another daughter. So this time he sits down, he writes a letter. He says, Dear God, I have to marry off a daughter. And again, I need 500 ruble. But can you do me a favor, God? Please don't give it to me through Rothschild, because he always skims off 100 for himself. Can you give it to me through someone else? Yaakov Avinu was scared to send Binyamin. Why? Because the Satan is mekatreg b'shas hasakan. Whereas Binyamin is relatively safe at home, but if he's en route, there is grave danger. Why should he be in danger? Because the Satan is mekatreg. Satan comes and says, Chas v'shalom, let something terrible happen. Now, from the perspective of that we're maimin b'yamunah shalema, that whatever is going to happen to you throughout the course of the year has been pre-decreed on Rosh Hashanah, on the previous Rosh Hashanah. So how do we fit in the concept of that the Satan prosecutes when a person is in danger? I mean, whatever was decided, Rosh Hashanah, the Satan only prosecutes when a person is in danger. If the previous Rosh Hashanah they said the guy's going to make it, he's going to make it. And if he's not going to make it, he's not going to make it. Where does this come in? How do we put this into perspective? If you look in the Rabbeinu Bechai in this week's Parsha, so he begins, as he always does, with a pasuk in Mishlei. And the pasuk talks about V'yoyrach tzadikim chayim, and he goes on to say, the Shlomo Melech does, that through tzedakah, a person's life is extended. There's a very interesting shmuz at the beginning of Parasha Vayechi, where the Rabbeinu Bechai explains that every person comes to this world with a certain amount of days. Vayikruvu Yemei Yisrael Lamus. So that means, whenever it says Vayikruvu, that means it came close to the allotted amount of days that he had down here on this world. Now, somebody once told me, I went to visit an old person over, shouldn't say it that way, but a Geschmacke Zayde, Elte Zayde, over Shabbos. And I sat down with him and he says, this guy has a tremendous sense of humor. He's in his high 90s, and he said, I went to the doctor yesterday, and the doctor asked me, tell me, how do you feel when you wake up in the morning? I told him, surprised. Person has a certain amount of days. However, it doesn't mean, it's not etched in stone, that the amount of days, says the Rabbeinu Bechai in this week's Parsha, that you come down to this world with, is the amount of days you're going to stay with. There is a possibility of an extension to add on more days, and there is also a possibility where days are taken off. And the Rabbeinu Bechai points out two instances. One is the famous story in the Sechtes Bava Basra about Binyamin HaTzadik, who was the Gabbai Tzedakah during a Shnas B'tzaris, during a hunger year, and a woman with 7 kids came and they were dying of hunger. He says, it's empty, the coffers are empty. She says, well, I'm going to die because your coffers are empty. So he gave her money from his own pocket, which was not easy during those times. We can't understand. I was once speaking to someone who he's told me that in the Warsaw Ghetto he gave away a whole roll of bread to someone that was dying, a family that was not much dying. So he said, I laugh when I pass by a big building and there's a sign on the building to this and this family on the building. A huge, big thing. They said, what they say, Hungarians like, how does it go? Their names on a building, and Polish people like their buildings on their name. But he says, I passed by a huge, big building, this yeshiva, huge campus, the so-and-so family. I said, giving away that loaf of bread in the Warsaw Ghetto was much more than giving away this building, than donating this building. Al Kapanim, so Binyamin HaTzadik gave away in that Shnas B'Tzorah's bread, and a while later he was sick, and the Malachim came and they tainted, saved the life of a wife and 7 children. He's going to die, so Sifu Lechav Beishana, they added 22 years on the basis of this cheshbon. If you save one person, it's Gilu, you save Olam Ali. So clearly the Gemara is telling us that Binyamin HaTzadik's days were over, and this was an extension to the days which he was not born with. So I want to put this a little bit into perspective. I was riding with somebody, just got a ride, I don't know who the person was, and after he hears this, he may know who I am, but Al Kapanim, I overheard him talking apparently to his wife, and he was saying, at one point he was a little angry, and he was saying, this is what he said, okay? Why are you calling me 5 times every 15 minutes? I told you the first time I'll be home in 5 minutes. What did he just say? He's angry at his wife that she's calling him for 5 times every 15 minutes. He told her the first time he'd be home in 5 minutes. So I guess 5 minutes means, some people say they use 5 minutes like as soon as I can. Some people say, don't in 5 minutes I'll be there, okay. Some say, I'm trying to be home in 5 minutes. You ever call up a bank or something and they say, all our customer representatives, customer specialists are now busy. The approximate wait time is 6.5 minutes. You know what that usually means? You sit there for 6.5 minutes, and then the music stops, and you hear dial tone. Did that ever happen to you? I don't know. How can I help you? Finally after 6.5 minutes, so this call comes on, and go, hi, can I help you? And your cell phone drops the call right there and then. So in other words, Min HaShamayim, what really happened over here is Min HaShamayim, they told you that you are going to be sitting here for 6.5 minutes. What happens afterwards is irrelevant. There is time in this world. There's time that we have to spend in a doctor's office. There's time that we have to spend online. There's time that we have to spend on traffic. Every moment of our life there's a cheshbon. That's mitzad what is basher. But there are extensions, and on the other hand, there are things that are drawn back in the other way. Now, the Rabbeinu Bechaya points out the story that the Gemara tells us about Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Now, Chizkiyahu HaMelech was a great tzaddik. The Gemara says there were Baidik Midan at Beersheva, and you did not find a baby that was either 6 or 6.5 years old that wasn't Baki in all of Memtes, Panim, Shaltumah, V'Tahar, and all the halachis. Everybody came to Night Seder. We had a very interesting incentive for the Avos Abanim and Night Seder programs. There was a soldier there with a sword, and if you left, he convinced you it would be very geschmack to go back in and learn. Actually, it doesn't even say there was a soldier there. It says, No'atz Cherev, the Beis HaMedrash. And they just saw the sword and they got the idea. Interesting word from Chaim Shmulevitz. The next generation was a generation of Oivdei Avodah Zarah. It says it seems if you really want to get a generation to learn in such a way that they raise another generation, you really can't do it through a sword. That's what he says. But Akupanim, Chizkiyahu HaMelech was very great. The Gemara says he was almost Mashiach. And he had a visit from Yeshaya HaNavi. And Yeshaya HaNavi told him something very, very sad. My father used to learn this Gemara with me when I was a little boy. He used to sit down. Because he realized the Yesodis over here. Yeshaya comes to him and says, Chizkiyahu HaMelech, yes. So nice of the Navi to come visit. Well, it may not be so nice, because I have a nevuah for you. And the nevuah is, Tzavel Beisecha, write your will to your family, because you are going to die. And Chizkiyahu said, why? And he said, you were mevatel, the first mitzvah in the Torah, which is the mitzvah of Pru Revu, the mitzvah of having children. You willfully did not get married. So he said, there's a reason I didn't. I didn't because he knew Baruch HaKodesh. He's going to have a son Menashe, who is going to be a big Oived Avodah Zarah, and he is going to be the next king. So it's not just he's an Oived Avodah Zarah. He's going to lead everyone astray. And Yeshaya said, what are you mixing into the Rebbeinu Shem's business? Ruach HaKodesh, you're a mitzvah to listen to the Torah. So he said, okay, Yeshaya, I have a great idea. Give me your daughter. your schus and my schus will help. So, he said I just gave you a nevuah that you're going to die, and you want me to give you my daughter. So at this point, Yeshaya gets a little bit upset. Chizkiyahu gets upset, and he says to him like this. He says to Yeshaya, Ben Amitz, the son of Amitz. I guess in those ways, when you want to refer to someone by his last name, you said Ben so-and-so. Kali Nevi Yascha would say, you finished your nevuah? Fine, leave. Kach mekabalani b'dei savi abba, I have a kabbalah for my father's father, who is David HaMelech. Shafil cherev chadam meneches al tzavari shalot, even if a sharp sword lies on the neck of a person, al yimna atzmai min harachmin. Okay? Now, so he says, miyad v'yatzav panav alakir, he turns to the wall and he starts davening, and right there and then, they gave an extension of 15 years to Chizkiyahu's life. So you see that a person can have an allotted amount of days, and clearly there's an extension to it. Now, David HaMelech came with how many years, does anyone know, down to this world originally? What was the original allotment? Very good, nothing. 30 days. And when Adam HaRishon saw all of the future generations, and he saw that David was destined to live only for 30 days, so he went and gave away 70 years of his own life. Now I want to put this into perspective a little bit. If you ask a little child, we're going away. When are we going away? So you're going to tell him on the 14th. He doesn't know what you're talking about. A week from Tuesday. Doesn't know what you're talking about. So I found this very often. What do little children say? They say, after Shabbos, before Shabbos. Their world, the way they measure the world is, the only way that a 3 or a 4-year-old, he measures it, whether it's before Shabbos or after Shabbos. His world spins around Shabbos. Now, the Brisker Rav said that little children have simcha because they're closer to the Bria. They have a certain level of amunah, right? Shecharav Beis Hamikdash, Nevuah was given to Ktanim and to Shaitim. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says that in the genes of the world, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a world that lasts only for 6 days. Shabbos gives it a koyach to go for another 6 days. Without Shabbos, there would not be another world. There once was a Rav who made a takana. He said by Kiddush, it's getting a little bit out of hand over here. The mitzvah of Einik Shabbos that people have with that 999 or the other Shlivovitz stuff. He said 1 drink per person by Kiddush. That is the takana of the Beis HaMedrash. Then he saw someone rolling out of the Beis Medrash and looked like he thought it was 1 bottle per person. And he went over to him and said, we said 1 drink per person. He said, Rebbe, when I take 1 drink, I'm a new person. So 1 drink per person, each person had a new drink. There is a Kabbalah, there is an inyan that when Shabbos comes, you are a new person. Now, if the Rabbi Shalom, David HaMelech is like everything. He's the Malchus based David, he's Mashiach. So how come HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't give him years? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu only give him 30 days? And the answer is David HaMelech represents Klal Yisrael in a matziv where we blew it. We used up our days. We have nothing. The Indian of the Tzaddik talks about the fact that Yosef HaTzaddik fought off the Taiva, and David HaMelech technically was nichshal with an Sish with Bathsheba and bounces back. Kol Oimer David Chata, it ain't el atoya, el lahoyres shuva l'rabim. David's whole metzias is, I am in the abyss, I hit bottom, I did everything worse, my life is over, and guess what? My life is over, but the Baruch gives me a new life. I'm starting again. And that's why in his very essence, in his very birth, David had no years, and it was given to him b'tur matan. Because that is the metzias of David HaMelech. And Memela, Chizkiyahu, the Einikol of David, says to Yeshaya, give me your daughter. I just told you in the Nevuah you're going to die. He said, so what? So what? It's a Nevuah. What's with you? There's no way around it. He said, the Nevuah says, my days are up. I have this Messiah from my father's father, from David HaMelech, that my days are up. But guess what? HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates new days, like Shabbos creates a new week. And you prove your emunah to me through your daughter. There was a tzaddik in Eretz Yisrael, his name was Rav Cheshin. And he used to read palms. When I say read palms, I don't mean on the avenue, the $5, those guys. I always wonder why they never win the lottery, right? These people, they know everything. This Rav Cheshin looked at your palm, and he was the real thing. He looked at your forehead, he saw stuff. He did not want to read the palm or the forehead of a frum person. He said, why not? He said, because I could see one thing, and then one good Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah changes everything. There was a man by the name of Leon Trotsky. Trotsky, as you know, was took over after Lenin, right? And he almost took over after Lenin, and he believed that communism was everything, and communism is going to save the world. There was only one problem. Stalin also believed that, and Stalin believed there was communism under him, and Trotsky believed there was communism under him. And when he saw he was losing to Stalin, Trotsky ran away to a nice safe haven where he would be totally safe, ran to Mexico, where I think he was safe for actually 3 hours before some strange masked men came and killed him. But Trotsky, of course, was one of the founders of that wasn't the name on his birth certificate, Trotsky. The name on his birth certificate was Leibele Bernstein. And the Chafetz Chaim, once there was a menal over there of a cheder, and the Chafetz Chaim wouldn't look at him the whole Shabbos. He said, "What did I do?" He said, "You had a boy Leibele Bernstein?" He says, "Yeah, he was a Yosim, he was impossible." He said, "I had to throw him out." Chafetz Chaim was not happy that he threw him out. He saw what was going to happen. So the story I heard from the Shem Rabbi Perzel Zankazon, the Rosh Yeshiva and Yeshiva Far Rockaway. He said he was once sitting there, and a man walked many years ago, and a man walked in, and he wanted him to give bar mitzvah lessons to his son. He said, "Okay." And he started teaching him, and came back. He said, No. I said bar mitzvah lessons. No teaching about Yiddishkeit. I don't want that. Just bar mitzvah lessons. Nothing to do with God. Nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. Understand that? Just for the affair. So whatever it was, he taught him more than just bar mitzvah lessons. But as the time went on, he spoke to this father, and it turned out he either was or was the son of, he remembered the name. And the story was Trotsky had a sidekick who was one of his top-notch people. That if Trotsky would have become the head of Russia, he would have been the guy in second in command. And the two of them were walking down the street, and there was a man standing outside, and he was going, Atzenta, for a minyan. And the guy was crying, "Please have your side." So this guy said to Trotsky, "The guy's crying, let's go in." He goes, "Are you out of your mind? I spent my life uprooting this. Right? What I did to destroy this, you're going in?" The guy's crying, let me go in and say, "Baruch, big deal." So he went in, and Trotsky said, "Don't talk to me again." And he turned and went in the opposite direction. Lamaisa, this was the anacle of that guy that came for the bar mitzvah lessons. He said he spoke to him, and he wrote the story, and many, many years later, the kid called him up and said, "By the way, I'm sitting and learning in Koil," and a bunch of, right? That one baruch that he decided he's going in. If he would have stayed with Trotsky, trust me, Stalin had no rachmanis on any of Trotsky's assistants. They all would have a hard time buying a life insurance policy. They were not Marach Yom, for some, by strange coincidence. That one baruch who saved his life. Shaddai, his years were up. The baruch who gave him a new life. So Rabbi said tonight is Asara Btevet, and it's a Schachter de Parnusa. And Chazal say that if Asara Btevet would fall on Shabbos, we would fast even on Shabbos. And the Chassam Sofer says why? Because it's a pasuk says when Nebuchadnezzar laid siege on Yerushalayim, the pasuk says Be'etzem Yom Hazeh Samach Melech Bavel on Yerushalayim. So the Chassam Sofer says that Nebuchadnezzar was worried. He knew that in the schus of Shabbos, Klal Yisrael will break the Gzeira. In other words, it may be that the days of Yerushalayim are over. It may be that it's gone. However, through the Mesiras Nefesh of Shabbos, Shabbos gives you a new life even after your days are gone. So he planned his siege dafka on Shabbos to break their Shabbos. And he wanted to take advantage of the kitrug on Chilul Shabbos and a lack of simcha on Shabbos. That is the reason, says the Chassam Sofer, that we would fast even on Shabbos. So Hayois, that the whole inyan of Asara B'Tevis is Kedushas HaShabbos, which gives us a new lease on life. And we know what's going on now in Eretz Yisrael with the buses. So I thought it would be a good time to remind ourselves of a story that I heard from an old Zayda who lived, his children upon him lived on my block, an old man many years ago. And he goes back, and this Yid was in Eretz Yisrael, still in the times of the Turks, before World War I. And he was an entrepreneur, and he got a hold of a brand new invention, unheard of, at least in the streets of Yerushalayim at that point, called a bus. Had those fenders with the light bulbs on top of the fenders, and you had to crank it up. But it was a bus. And he formed a company called Eged. And he ran the first buses from, I think it was called Eged, originally named. And he ran, or was the to Egged, whatever. And he called it Connect or something like that. And he ran buses from the Kaisel, those days where the Kaisel was, to where the Yidden lived in Yerushalayim, back and forth. And a couple of individuals came by and they told him, we don't like the idea that your buses are not running on Shabbos. You know, we're planning big things over here and you're getting in our way. He said, my buses aren't going to run on Shabbos. Well, the problem was drivers were threatened and they were beaten, and so his drivers came and said, if we're not going to ride a Shabbos, they're going to kill us or beat us. So he had no choice. They came back to him and said, so your buses are going to drive on Shabbos or not? So he said, forget it, I'm selling the company. And at that point, he gave it up. Now at that point, it was also World War I, and it was also under the Turkish government. The Ottoman Turks were crumbling at the seams, and the whole Turkish Empire was one shtick corruption, and people were literally lying on the floor dying of hunger. And then the Sultan, or whoever he was, the governor of the local Sultan's emissary in Yerushalayim, the Turkish government was badly in need to save whatever was left of the war. So they made a new law. They printed paper currency, okay? And they said you are no longer allowed to have any silver coins. The paper currency of the Ottoman Empire at that point was worth about as much as, trying to use the right mashal, but I can't think of anything I could repeat. But you get the idea what it was worth, okay? And nobody was going to take it. Nobody was going to use no one was going to use this paper. But you weren't allowed to have gold coins. So that created a kind of a black market, obviously, for gold coins. So this man, is dying of hunger, him and his family. So he starts trading, and he's doing pretty good on this business. So he opens up, for a cover for his black marketeering, he opens up a bakery on top of the police station. They asked him, why on top of the police station? He said, because the police get paid in the paper coins, and the paper currency, they have nothing to do with it. They come up and they change it for the golden coins. Then they go out to patrol the streets to make sure no one changes the paper currency for it. He said it was the best place to do it, you know what I mean? He says they're not going to bother him, the police, because they need him to get, that no one's going to live. Because no one took these paper stuff. But this went on for a while, and one day he was summoned to come to the Sultan's palace. It was Friday night. He didn't know what to do. Do I go? Do I not go? And not going wasn't much of an option. Do I run for it? Do I not run for it? So he came to ask the Lelev Rebbe. He says, should I run for my life? What should I do? So where are you going to run? They're going to catch you. He says, go. And come back and tell me what happened. So he took that as a passive, indirect bracha. The Rebbe said, come back. He's coming back. So he comes to the Sultan not knowing what to expect. And the Sultan says, my dear brother, come inside. He goes, we're brothers. Right. Sure. Whatever you say. He says, and the Sultan starts telling him his whole life story. And as he starts telling this, I forgot his first name, but he started telling this Yiddish his whole life story. You were born here and there, and your mother was this and this, and your father was this and this. And he tells him every little thing. He had a full folder on him. He said in the 3rd grade you were thrown out for this, in the 6th grade you were thrown out for that, and in the 8th grade the Rabbi was thrown out because of you, and you know what I mean? And you had a fight with you. Like he couldn't believe it. He's telling him his whole story of his life, until he gets to the point where he had the buses and he gave up the buses, and then he gets to the point about his, quote, bakery on top of the police station. This is it. And the Sultan says, follow me. He says, I can kill you right now. Stands there, says, my life is in the Rebbeinu Shalom's hands. And the Sultan opens up a curtain. He doesn't know what to expect. And over there behind the secret room of the curtain, he says, if you ever reveal what you're going to see now to anybody, you will be executed on the moment. I gave him some hope. As long as he doesn't reveal it. And the Sultan opens up a curtain, and what's there? Boxes and boxes of paper currency. He says, switch it for gold. Okay? You better not tell anybody. So by then, of course, his business became much more lucrative. And he also had a pass to be able to come into the palace whenever he wanted. The guards shouldn't check him. Because he didn't want the guards to check him, right? The Sultan didn't want the guards to see what he has. So they wondered. And this went on for a while. And Ma'aseh Shahaya Kachaya, that one day he was summoned Friday night by the Lelev Rebbe. And the Lelev Rebbe said, give me the pass. He said, you're going to use it for your business dealings. He said, I want to have it. And one day he was summoned, and this was toward the Friday night, and he came to a meeting, he says, and sitting over there was Rabbi Yosef Chaim Zonnefeld and the Lelev Rebbe, and they said to him, take your pass and go to the Sultan. For what? To went in and ask. He just ran over, it was Friday night, and what he saw, a train, and on the train was the Turkish army needed fodder. They knew they lost. They knew the British were conquering. But they were determined just push people and have them die, just push it off another minute. and they took they rounded up like 500 people in Yerushalayim, old people, young people, kids, babies, and just gave them guns with no training whatsoever, nothing, just pushed them, just be shot down in front of the British, give us a chance to escape. So he came into the Sultan with his secret pass, and he said to the Sultan, we're good brothers, remember? Such good brothers. He goes, because we're such good brothers, I have advice for you. He says, what's your advice? He says, my feeling is, it's bizarre for the Turkish government that they should have such soldiers. I can't take it. The honor of the Ottoman Turks is killing me. Anyway, after all, we are such good brothers, and you want to continue our brotherly arrangements. So he let the lion's share of them go at that moment. Shabbos creates new life, as we discussed in many ways. I can go into many stories. I don't want to get into that at that moment. But the point is, it always comes with a serious nefesh. Now, these 3 days, day number 8, 9, and 10th of Tevis, the Gemara in Megillah refers to as 3 days of darkness. The Gemara says that it was so dark, it was as bad as in the days of Haman. Hushcharu Penei Meitainis. What happened so terrible in these 3 days? Well, on day 8, Talmei HaMelech ordered the 70 Zakanim into 70 different rooms, and he had them interpret the Torah. And that was so bad. Hushcharu Penei Kahaman. What was so bad? On day 9, which was today, is the yard site, at least according to some, of Ezra, Sefer, and Nehemiah. And on day 10 is Asara Btevet. Now, we don't know 100% when the yard site of Ezra, Sefer is. Although in the Slichas you will be saying tomorrow, depending on how early you wake up, or if you find it. I know some always wind up saying the Slichas of Tanis Esther. I don't know why, but I'm still confused about which Slichas. He said, I don't get into that. Different story, different problem. But you will be saying, if you were saying the right Slichas tomorrow, you're going to say the words Tarav, Boy Hanois, and Imrei Shafar. That's the remez that Ezra was nifter. Some say Asara B'Tevis. The Yaris Devash actually says we don't know when Ezra was nifter because it says that the Torah was roy to be given through Ezra like through Moshe, and just like we don't know when Moshe Rabbeinu, where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried, so we don't know exactly when Ezra was nifter, whether it was the 9th or 10th day of Tevis. Alright, so why 3 days of darkness? They translated the Torah, so every translation today, when they make a new translation, there's a big suit and there's ads in all the papers and there's parties and they're all fast. What's the big deal? I mean, who translated it? 70 Chachamim. They changed a couple of things over there, okay, to be diplomatic, to be politically correct over there. But why the terrible tinus? Why the terrible tinus? I was once sitting on, I mentioned this many times, in the Williamsburg bus. I remember this. And on the BQE, when it hits the curve and you can see the bottom of Manhattan, just as it, right before Williamsburg, right before the Brooklyn Bridge. And I remember two people sitting there, I'm not going to say which country they were, but they had the following conversation. One of them said to the other one, what are those buildings over there? And maybe Lashon Hara, so I'm not going to say where they came from. And the other one said, that's Manhattan. He goes, that's the whole thing, just a few little buildings. I said, not so little. Those Americans. In London, I said, 10 times the size of this. And they're going on and on. So he's trying to explain to him, but from this vantage point, you only see the first few buildings. Like, Manhattan is so you Americans, right. So he was convinced he already saw the whole Manhattan. It's only 2-3 buildings that you could see. What was the darkness of Torah? That's some Sefer says a Meir de Gevart. I want to preface this with a thing that I heard on the tape, a tape from Rabbi Greenwald, Rabbi Yosef Chaim Greenwald, and he said, from another of Greenwald, who was a famous Zayn Gezitten Stark, a very Tyre Yid. And he went to Ramachol Ber Weissmantel, the famous Ramachol Ber, the Nitro Rav, who saved so many people during the war. He was a genius. And Ramachol Ber wasn't well, and he came to visit him on Purim. And Ramachol Ber asked him, how many, I don't remember words or letters, I remember which one it was, but he asked him, how many words are there in the Megillah Esther? So he said, offhand, I don't know, I didn't count. But he said to him, can I ask the Rav what difference it makes? He goes, what difference it makes? And he told him how many words there are, or letters, I'm not sure. Whatever it was, 4,000 something. And he said, look in the Torah. And look by the first aleph that you find in the Torah. And count that many words that there are in the Megillah Esther, 4,000 something, and you'll come to a tuf. And count again that many words that there are in the Megillah Esther, and you'll come to a samach, Count another, that same amount of words will come to a tuf. Count another, that same amount of words that are in Megillah Esther, you'll come to a resh. So Esther in the Torah is spelled at the intervals of how many words there are in Megillah Esther. So he says, wow, that's amazing. He said to him, what about Mordechai? Mordechai's jealous. So Mechaber thought for a moment, he said, come back next year. So he came back next year, Purim, he told him, the Gemara says, Mordechai min Torah minayin Where do we see Mordechai in the Torah? Shenema Morderar, that's the Psamim, the Ketores, and the Targum says Moradachia, that's the remes to Mordechai. So the Bnei Yissaschar has a whole Indian why the Psamim is Mordechai. So he says, look at the word Psamim in the Torah, and take the Mem in the word Besamim, and count as many letters as there are, or words again, I'm not sure, in the Megillas Esther, and you'll come to a Resh. Count that same amount, you'll come to a Dalet. Count that same amount, you'll come to a Chaf. Count that same amount, you'll come to a Yud. And you'll see that, so he went and actually counted it, and he saw that he was correct. And as a matter of fact, somebody else told me the story, that in one of the Arachim seminars, somebody came there that was, came there to make trouble. And yelling and screaming about Charedim. Though I can't imagine why anyone would yell at Charedim, but upon him, this person came and they gave this thing about, and they questioned the divinity of Torah, and she went home and checked it out on her computer, and saw that it was accurate. And she also went and made a cheshbon in her computer. What are the chances of someone having prefigured this out beforehand? And it came to an astronomical fraction, the possibility that someone did this thinking beforehand, that this should work out. And the next time they were there by a thing, no, they didn't recognize them. She was dressed with a shaitel, and he was dressed there. And the man came over to him and said, "Who are you?" He said, "We're Mordechai and Esther." "You are?" "No, we're the ones from Mordechai and Esther. That changed our lives totally." Now, the Torah is not a science book. It's not a history book. It's Serufei Avaya, our lives. He showed where, if you would take the synopsis of your life, the Megillas Esther in your life, you will find it in the Torah and the Pasuk, if we had the right eyes to be able to see it. And that's why he was called, as incidentally, the Ramah has a sefer called Mechir Yayin. Mechir Yayin is a Pirush of Megillas Esther. And that's because the Ramah, there was a terrible epidemic. The Ramah had to run for his life, and he was hiding in a cave or some remote village, and he had no wine on Purim, no food, no nothing. So he said, Mechir Yayin. Instead of the wine, I'm going to write a Pirush on Megillas Esther. And over there he says, he makes a cheshbon that Tes Tevis is the day that Esther was taken to Achashverosh. So he fasts for that day. Why is Ezra called Ezra HaSofer? Because he's a Sofer. Why is a Sofer called a Sofer? Because he writes. So he should be HaKoisev, the scribe. Why HaSofer? The Torah refers to Moshe as Safra Rabbi the Yisrael. The Be'er Moshe has a whole beer on this. Because Yisrael is Roshei Tevis Yeshishim Ribi Oisius the Torah. There are 600,000 letters to the Torah, 600,000 original neshamas. You and I and everyone, we all have a letter in the Sefer Torah that is our Sefer Torah. If we had the right microscope, we could see our life story in the Torah. That is what the Torah is all about. And Ezra came to a people, he said, "Wake up, leave Bavel, come back, build the Beis HaMikdash." They said, "What? It was so comfortable in Bavel, Ishal Karmel, we're going to some dangerous area. Come. And he took them, and he showed them what was going on. They came to Eretz Yisrael, it was a Churban what was going on. The lineage had to be clarified, and no one knew what to do, and the Kutim, and they were being attacked, and it was Rosh Hashanah, and they were overwhelmed with a pachad. And Ezra and Nehemiah got up, and they said, "Don't cry. L'chu ichlu mashmanim, shesu mamtakim, eat keshmak food, drink sweet drinks, shulchu manas le'inachal," also a remes on Purim, ki kadosh hayom la'lineinu. It's Rosh Hashanah. It's Rosh Hashanah? So eat and drink? Rosh Hashanah, cry. It's a pachad. No, because we look at Rosh Hashanah differently. We do tshuva. Rosh Hashanah, we say, "Hashem, you gave us another year? An extension!" That means you said, "God, I have a certain amount of time, and you gave me more time." He gave them a chiyas, their maimin on it. Yosef said to the brothers, "V'ata!" And now, Alti Atsu, don't be depressed. So I heard from Rav Melech Biram and said, "Amar de Gevart." Someone who passed away, he has a past, he has his life that he has to deal with up there. He has a future, he has Tchiyas HaMesa. The only thing a mess doesn't have is an Ata. He doesn't have a present. So Yosef said, "V'ata, you're alive now. Alti Atsu, forget yesterday, forget tomorrow." The Rebbe Shem gives you a new life. The Chayz of Lublin, in every kvittel and the other kvittel, when people came in to ask Eitzes, he had a Mishnah, Schachter and a Mishnah. They thought, maybe he has a smother contest or something. He said, no. He said, when I give people advice, because their life is in the Torah. That's why it says someone is Maver Sedra, Marichin Layama Vishnoisav. Why? If you're Maver Sedra, you're Zeicher to an extension of life. You get to that letter, which is your letter, and they say, okay, go weiter. Now, the Marami Pana says Ezra, Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, was a Gilgal of Ezra. Hereini Keben Shiv Mashana, a new life. Ezra says, even if your time is up, And we're finished. We came to Eretz Yisrael. We gave everything up. The Kutam are attacking us. We can't build the Beis Mikdash. We have no money. We're being attacked. It's all over. It's a done deal. The euro is gone. This is gone. I invested all over. The world economy is collapsing. I don't know. Ron Paul's becoming president. We're finished. Relax. Hashem gives you new life. He says Rabbi Gamliel is Nehemiah. He even says this, that Rabbi Gamliel was thrown out of the Nesias, and most of the words of Ezra were said by Nehemiah. There's no separate sefer for Nehemiah because he shows how the lives keep reconnecting. You know what happened when they typed out the Torah, when they translated the Torah? So the Greeks and later, subsequently, the King James Bible, there's the Bible, all right, big deal, nice story. And what happened was the Yidden felt, the Goyim also have an interpretation. They look at it differently. And the Mela, they lost their Torah Shabbat Peh. They lost their Emunah. And because of that came the Misyavnim and the Tzedaikim and all of the other tzarais. Rav Shimish Kap, not the Baal Shem Tov. Shimish Kap told the Bacha once, he was depressed. He said, when you go Hagba, stare at the letters of the Sefer Torah, your life is there. It'll give you a new chiyas. Chavetz Chaim says, anyone realize worlds are turning over here? There was a famous story that some Sefer had a Rabbi, or it was a Rav Matcha Benetti, was an Ish Kaddish. And he traveled someplace and he passed away in a different town. And they buried him in that town. And the Chaver Kadisha said, how are you talking? You buried him in that town. He belongs in our town. So they went to the Chassam Sofer and asked if they can move him over. So the Chassam Sofer sat down to write a tshuva. And he was about to write, you can move him over, and he fell asleep. And he had a dream. And Rav Matcha Benet said, leave me there. He said, why? So he said, because I was once engaged to a certain girl and I broke the shidduch. And that girl is buried over there. And where I'm buried next to that girl. There's a cheshbon over there that I have to be over there. So someone says, you see the greatness of Rav Matcha Benet, you see the hashgacha, but you see the greatness of the Chassam Sofer. Then in the Shemayim, they wouldn't let him write something which is not emes, because his Torah was Torah's emes. So the Luach Davar Be'ita, he brings a whole inyan that there was a minig in some places to do Achnasa Sefer Torahs today. To show that we believe in the Kiddush of Torah, that we believe this is our life story, that you sit down to learn at night, you make a Seder, it brings a whole Simchas Achayim into your life. It's a different world. The Rabban Hashem is listening to you. I was telling it to my class. The Rabban Hashem is listening to you. What Torah is, it's not just a book, it's not just a Chazara. And I said, show me, come back and tell me that the Rabban Hashem is listening to you. They were like rolling their eyes, Come on. No, I'm serious. So, one of the Bachar of my class, his name is Simcha Noble, a Tyra kid, he's going to be for sure a big Talmud Chacham, already is on the way. He comes back, he tells me this story, right? No? Comes back, I got some permission before I can say his name. He came back and he told me this story. He said he's sitting in shul, and the Rav is giving a shiur in Shulchan Aruch, and he's thinking like he sneezed, and he has a cold, and after the shiur, everyone comes over and they give each other Shalom Aleichem, that's how it was. And he says, I can't do it because they're going to catch a cold for me. And then he said, if I don't do it, people think I'm a snob or something. I get up and walk out, and he's like saying, you know what? God, help me out of this. Help me out of this. Like, who am I? He says, the shiur is over, and the Rav points to him and says, do me a favor, can you take the Shulchan Aruch and bring it back and bring it downstairs to me? He runs downstairs to the Rav's office, he comes back, everyone's gone. He said, you worked? Thank God, listen to me. He listened to me. Think about it. Think about what your connection to Torah is. The Rabbi Shalom listens to you. Somebody came to Rabbi Aaron, he said, wait, Schachter and Zvulun. Zvulun gets the Schar and Shemayim. What do I got to learn for? I'll just support someone else. It's easier. He said, maybe you'll have your Olam Haba, said Rabbi Aaron, but you won't have your Olam Hazeh. The Rabbi Shalom is listening to us. What does it mean the Satan is Mekatrik b'shas sakana? Why is the Satan Mekatrik when we're in danger? If a person comes out of Rosh Hashanah scot-free, God gave you a full year, foolproof. No danger in the world could affect you. If Chas v'Shalom at Rosh Hashanah they said, we don't know about this year. But a Yid comes out and says, Rabbi Shalom, I want a new life. I want a new chance. I know every breath is a gift from you. Every word of Torah that I learn is, I'm connecting myself to my inner essence. The Rabbi Shalom says to the Satan, leave him alone. When you're in a shas hasakana, and a person sees a lion coming toward him, and the ship is about to sink, so it's very hard to think about the Rabbi Shalom at that moment. I'll tell you many times the story, the guy came out of a shiur, he was old, he said, the whole world is Hashem, the whole world is Hashem, and he knocked his hand into an oven, and he said, the whole world is Hashem except this oven. That is not Hashem. In a shas hasakana, you forget, you lose your hope for a second. I'm doomed, I'm finished. Once you lose your hope, it reverts back to the original din of Rosh Hashanah. So when it says the Satan is Mekatrik b'shas sakana, what does that mean? What was the creed past Rosh Hashanah? This is the whole point. If we knew for sure it was the creed past Rosh Hashanah that we have smooth sailing, it's not a problem. Problem is that there's life based on B'tachon. And here you can lose your B'tachon. The Baal Shem Tov was once walking with a Talmud. They were in a desert. The Talmud said, I'm dying of thirst. I'm dying. Because you got to believe God can send you water here. Well, there's no pipes. There's no soda machine. There's no nothing. It's a desert. It's a cactus. There's nothing. I'm dying. B'tachon. Finally he said, okay, I believe it. Suddenly this guy shows up and he says, my paritz has been looking for his horse for the past 3 days. Did you see it? They said, no, you have any water here? Sure. So he says to the Baal Shem Tov, for 3 days he's walking around over here. He said, because it took you 3 days to get to this level of B'tachon. That's what it did. So it took that time. That's what it took. Said Reb Chaim Volozhin was giving a vad in Volozhin in the middle of the night, and he asked someone what time it was, and no one had a watch. So somebody made a sarcastic comment, and he said, if the Rebbe had B'tachon, all of a sudden, boom, this soldier comes running in, and he says, I'm going into battle, and I have this gold watch, and they hate me because I'm a Jew. Rebbe, take it. And he runs out. He said, hold it for me. Rebbe said, I can't take it. Christ said, don't keep it. He runs out. So he said, Chaim Volozhin said, you see, if you have B'tachon, you get a gold watch. He said beforehand, if I had the right B'tachon, I would get even a gold watch. So if it was a Chassidish Rebbe, they would say it was a Liyaya Navi. Chaim Volozhin would say it was a regular soldier, but it's the same thing. It doesn't make a difference. So the Rebbeinu B'chaya says a Moyer Dekavar. The Rebbeinu B'chaya says like this. He says, Chizkiah got extra days. Shem gives extra days in the schus of tzedakah. How does the tzedakah work? Nebuch, there's a poor family. Where? Over there, lives in that distant country. Write out a big check. There's a guy in your shul. Him. All right. The him is a much bigger schus than the person someone else. And guess what? Your own family is the biggest schus. That's like kibbut aveim is l'man yirichan yamecha. My father. You don't know my father. Yeah. Your father, yeah. That's going to be a richas yanim. And your children, supporting your children, giving them the time and giving them food is the biggest chus in the world at Shaykh. Ashrei shoymrei mishpat oiseh tzedakah b'chaleis. Can a person do tzedakah every minute? Zezon bonav v'naisa v'ktana. So the pasuk says like this. Yaakov Avinu, out of all the tzedakah that he did in his lifetime, right, turned over worlds. He fixed the cities when he came. Shalom and Shalom. What is his greatest schar? You would think that he fed Yosef, his most beloved son. Of course he fed him. No. That schar is unbelievable. The people that are the closest to you. And that's why he says, the Rabbeinu B'chaya, how long did Yaakov feed Yosef? 17 years. How long did Yosef feed Yaakov? 17 years. It goes hand in hand. The tzedakah that you give to the people that are closest to you, like I told you beforehand, that Yingaman comes late to Kyle, where the Kyle says, where were you? The Shmir says, he says, I saw there was this woman on the street, the kids were running all over the place, the baby was crying, the bus was coming, I stopped, I helped her. You Makadosh Shem Shemayim. Who's this woman? Let me help out, because she happens to be my wife. This inyan of helping the people the closest to you, that's the hardest to help, because there's not going to be a picture in the paper, so-and-so was honored by a dinner for helping his wife, for feeding his son. But in the Rabbeinu Shalom's honor roll, that is the biggest cover. And that is Zoicha to a person is Zoicha to the biggest extension of days. I want to share with you a story that I heard this week in conclusion. That the Yidden in Shanghai, the ones that got there, was a nest niggle. I'm not going to go into the whole story now. But Reb Chaim Oizer had given the word, all yeshivas should come to Vilna. Everyone came running to Vilna because the Russians officially freed Vilna. 2 hours later, they said, no, the Vilna people changed their mind. They want us to take us over again. And people said to Reb Chaim Oizer, he's naive. He doesn't realize that's going to happen. Why is he telling all the people to come to Vilna? Kids of the said they were in Vilna. They knew their days were numbered. They knew it's ticking. By Yikruv, the Nazis are coming. The Soviets wanted they should take citizenship. And they had to get out. And there was 3 parts to the puzzle. You needed an exit visa that Russia lets you out. You needed, they were able to get this whole story of the Japanese ambassador, the guy that, he was able to give a transit visa through Japan. Sugihara, thank you. But in order to get it through a transit visa to Japan, you have to have a final destination. And no country in the world was willing to open its doors. Either Nazis are going to burn you. Not nice talk, but what can we do? Our immigration quota, call us back next week, see if we can help you. Next year. But we're not going to be around next year. And don't call us back then. That was pretty much the attitude throughout the world. Now, they found out that there was some there was somebody who represented Holland. Holland wasn't doing too good then. The Germans were about to invade it. And he was officially the emissary. And there was an island, right, in South America called Curacao, whatever it was called. And officially, you didn't need a visa over there. So he said, go there. He said, but the Japanese, we've got to show them. So he made out a certificate that you officially don't need a visa over there. This is the visa to tell you don't need a visa. So it looked very official, so they gave it. So this Yid has a wife and 3 kids, and he gets the exit visa, which wasn't easy. My father was there also. He told me, it was very funny. If you were caught, talk about this Turkish story, if you were caught on the street with American dollars, you were shot by the Soviets. But when you came to buy the exit visa, they said 140. You pulled out your 140 ruble. No, 140 George Washingtons over there. But if we're caught with this, we're shot. You got it. But you got to bring it over here. Okay? So he got the exit visas.
They put him on a dog, and the dogs carry him.
Right. Thank you. Right. Right. I didn't hear that. They put him on a dog, the dogs carry him. In case you were shot. Okay? So there you go. So that's how you have to do it. Now, they got the transit visas. This Sarah Sugihara was leaning out of the train, stamping visas. The train pulled out of Vilna. They schlepped him out. But he could not get the visa that says you don't need a visa. So, Megetzachanaitza, they took him to some Lithuanian very talented guy who sat in the corner, and for a couple of bucks, he made you your instant visa. Any style that you wanted, any color, any style, he ordered it for you. And now, but in order to get the exit visa stamp, you have to come with a transit visa. So this Yid told me his father went in to follow the Russian exit visa stamp. Remember the name of Yaselevich. He was one of the Yasefkas. Who were the people that were close to Stalin? The Jews. They said they're going to be on Stalin's side. Yevtsekias, right. They were the ones that uprooted the yeshivas. They knew exactly all the inside Rabbanim. At the end, Stalin rewarded them tremendously by sending them tickets to Olam Haba or wherever they went. I don't know. I guess they're called Kedoshim. But this fellow's name was Yaselevich. And he comes in and he says, here are my papers. He says, yeah, can you please stamp the exit visa? And he looks at it and he takes out his gun and he's playing with it. And he says to him, he told me when his father repeated the story 50 years later, he used to shiver. And he would say, he looked at the 3rd visa, he said, how much did you pay for this? He said, the $1 fee. No, how much did you pay for this? You bought it by so-and-so on the corner, right? And this market, he wrote up this visa for you. And he swung it around his finger, the pistol, a few times, and he said, Shema Yisrael, this is it. And he said, you think we're fools? We're not going to chap what this is? He says, no, we're not fools. And he stamps the exit visa and he says, and I know you're not going to this island, Caruso, whatever it is. Carousel. And I go, no, Carousel, that's where you're going. He says, you're going to America. And all of a sudden there's like a tear in his eye and he says, in Yiddish, you're going to come to America and say a Kaddish someplace, remember me. I think he already saw the handwriting on the wall. Bottom line is, they're on a train now, which has to go through the entire Russia to the Far East. They still have 3 more stops. In Moscow, their papers are going to be checked, and in Vladislavsk, wherever it was, the base right before, what's it called? The base before the Far East? I got you on that one, huh?
Which one?
There's one base before the Far East in Russia, a Russian city, Vlad something.
No, Vladivostok, but that wasn't it.
Whatever it is, whatever he said. Okay, that's the place. That's where they stamped. So they would have to go 3 more stamps into the visas, and he knew he had false visas. And no, you did great till now. Okay, Al Kapanim, thanks a lot, appreciate it. Al Kapanim, so he's on the train. His wife is sitting on the train, right? She has the papers, which she doesn't know if it's going to work or not. The 2 kids, she's petrified. He sees an old Yid schlepping a suitcase. He said, let me go out and help him. She goes, don't get off the train. Don't worry. And he jumps off. He helps the Yid on. He helps the suitcase on. And boom, the train pulls out of the station. And the mother is left alone with these children. And he's like, what happened? And that was like the last train out. And this mother bursts into tears. And she's crying. This is like, she'll never find her husband again. The connections were impossible. There was no texting, no email, no nothing. This nigga was gone forever. Wars, papers, kids, not good papers, America, Japan, she never. And he says, Rabbani Shalom, I jumped off to help this guy. It has to be good. It has to be good. He wound up through the connections of certain Rav. They led him onto a small plane. And just as the plane was about to take off to go to Moscow, some military plane that he managed to bribe his way on, somebody came running and said, where are your papers? And he said, my wife has it. I missed the train. So they knew the story was true, so they led him on to the thing. When the station train pulled into the main station before Moscow, and the soldiers got up and they were finding these false papers right and left and schlepping people off the train to who knows what, never to be seen again, they asked her, where are your papers? She said, my husband has it. And he missed the train.
So they had so much Rahmanis on her that when she wound up pulling into the main station after Moscow, her husband was there waiting for her. And they realized afterwards they would have never survived if this didn't happen. And they wound up coming off to the Far East, wherever it was, and it was on Shabbos. And these guys had no clue what's real, what's not real. They knew already that would be the easiest thing. And there was one bacher that didn't have his papers. I think he told me it was Mendel Kaplan, the Rosh Hashiva, who would be Rosh Hashiva Philadelphia. And one of the other people said, I think I'm pretty good also at least as far as these guys can read, because they couldn't read anyway, those guards over there. So the Amshev Rebbe said, and write it. It was a Shabbos. They write it on Shabbos. And he wrote it, and when they passed by, so he said, they were letting everyone by. And they said, when this person who missed the train, he came by, so the guard looked at it and said, these are authentic papers. These, I can tell, this is real. So Yoeli said afterwards, he said, there was no moment in my life that I felt my life is over. If you can think what that means, your wife and kids are off and you're not missing a subway train. And there was no moment that his wife felt that the world is dead. And that was their chiyas. And that is the koyach that we have. That is the Vayechi Yaakov. The koyach that at the moment that you feel, the moment that you feel, if you have the betachon that the world is over, you should know that that's when your world is beginning.